Maison Sorne crossed the whole length of the centenary hall to claim me. 300 of the oldest names in the jewel trade, seated between us, under 100 years of the house's own chandeliers. The entire Sorne board turned in their gilded chairs. And the woman's own mother on her feet at the head of the room in the middle of having me thrown out of the building as a thief.
Hi everyone! Thank you for staying with me. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Stay close, stay connected.
Maison Sorne, the coldest heir the trade had ever made, and the one woman every cutter and setter in that house had been raised to be afraid of. Set down the founder's loop she had just been handed to open the centenary, stepped away from the dais where she was an hour from being named the next president of Maison Sorne, walked the length of 40 feet of black marble and gold light to the bench girl her mother had paid 4 months ago to disappear, and said the sentence that cracked a 100-year house down to its foundation stone. That is my child she is carrying. I'm going to tell you how a woman who set other people's stones in the back rooms of that house, uncredited and invisible, ended up being claimed, with a child they had all sworn would never have a name, in front of the people who had been paid to make sure she stayed gone. But you have to let me go back, because nothing about that gala makes sense until you understand the 4 months I had spent carrying a secret heavier than any stone the house owned, and the one season before that, when I was, very briefly, the most alive I have ever been. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description. Tell us where you are watching from and subscribe. I want to back up first. My name is Elodie Sayer and I read stones. Not palms, not cards. Stones. The real kind, the cut and the rough, the diamond and the paste and the thing, pretending to be either. Put a stone in my hand in a dark room and I can read. Somewhere behind my sternum in a place that has no name, the truth of it. Whether it is what it says it is, where it has been. The flaw it is hiding under the table. The hand that last said it wrong. I am a bench setter, which is a polite way of saying I am one of the women in the back rooms of a great house who makes the thing the front rooms take the credit for. I sit at a pin under a hard lamp, and I set what the designers draw and the salon sells, and the house gleams, and no one in the salon ever thinks of the bench. Most of the people who do my work do it with a loop and a graver and a back of iron, and they do it beautifully. And the necklaces leave in their velvet boxes, and no one remembers the hands. I did all of that too. But I also did the other thing, the thing I have never once been able to write on a worksheet, the thing that made me, by 26, quietly the only person in that house who always knew which stone was lying. I can hold a diamond up to a dark window and tell you it has been switched. I can close my hand around a stone and feel that it is glass dressed as fire. I do not know how else to say it so that it does not sound like a fairy story, and it is not one. Stones keep what is done to them. People forget that. My grandmother is the reason I can do it, and she is the reason you are going to believe the rest. So let me set her down properly. She raised me. My mother was a name on the back of a photograph and nothing more. And she had spent 50 years in the back rooms of the trade, a sorter and then a setter in houses that never once let her stand in the salon. 50 years of being the woman at the bench that no one in the front of the house remembered was there. And somewhere in those 50 years of holding other people's fortunes up to the light, she learned to read what a stone had been through. Which diamond in the parcel was a swapped paste, which emerald had been cooked to hide a fracture, which heirloom on its way to auction was not the heirloom at all. She had a small brass loop, the brass gone soft and warm from 50 years in her apron, and the first true memory I have of being myself is her folding my 2 small fingers around that loop and teaching me the only thing I have ever really believed. A stone doesn't lie about what it's been through, Elodie, she would say, with my eye pressed to the warm brass. People will lie to your face your whole life, but the stone in their hand was there for all of it. And the stone can't lie. She made it ordinary, the way I could close my hand around a cold thing and know it. You just feel for what it's been through, child. Most folk are too busy watching the setting to feel the stone. And I understand now that the ordinariness was the kindest, most protective thing she could have done. Because she had seen what powerful houses do to a poor woman who is gifted out loud. She set stones until her hands would not hold the graver. And then she sat by the one window of our one room and got smaller. And the night before she died, she folded my fingers around the warm brass of that loop, the way she had when I was small, and said, "People will spend your whole life telling you what you are, Elodie. A bench girl, only a bench girl. The hands in the back room. Don't believe a word of it." When she died, I was 19, and the only thing I took from her one room was that worn brass loop, and I have not worked a single day without it in my apron for 7 years. Remember the loop. It comes back, the way the truth always does. I want to show you the gift before I tell you what it cost, because otherwise it is only a claim, and I have spent my whole life refusing to be only a claim. Years ago, before Maison Sorne, I was the lowest bench hand in a smaller house, and one season a director there was quietly running stones out the back, taking a client's good diamond in for cleaning and sending it home as a clever paste, certain the bench girls were furniture. I cleaned and reset a parcel of those stones one winter, and one night I held a client's ring up to the dark window and read it off the stone in my palm, that it was not the diamond that had come in, that the fire was wrong, that someone with a key had made the swap. I told the floor manager what the stone had shown me. He looked at me the way you look at a girl with a loop and an accent from the wrong part of the city, and he told me to mind my bench. And I stood there, invisible, in an agony of knowing. And a year later, the fraud came out, the slow, public way these things do. 3 clients and a quiet settlement. And the manager told the story of how he had always thought something was off about that director. And no one ever knew that a bench girl had read the whole theft off a cold stone a year before anyone with a name would listen. That is the gift, and that is the curse. The same woman, the same hour. I am right, and I am invisible. And being right is worth nothing if you have made yourself too small to be believed when you say the stone has already told you. So that is the shape of me when the name Sorne first reached down into my small life. The best eye in any back room I had ever sat in, and the cheapest, and the most disposable. A woman who could feel a forgery in her closed hand, and had spent her whole life learning that the feeling was worth nothing unless someone with a name decided to spend their own standing on it. Maison Sorne was the oldest jewel house in the country, 100 years of cut stones and colder money, the name carved over a flagship of glass and gold in the heart of the city. When a setting posting went up on their bench, I did not let myself believe I would get it. I got it. The best back room in the trade, and they took me for my hands and never once asked what else the hands could do. The man who hired me onto that bench, the only person at Sorne who ever once treated me as though I were entirely real, was the old master setter, and his name was Mr. Faber. He was past 70 and going blind the slow way old setters do, the close work finally taking the eyes that had done it. And he ran the bench by feel and by 40 years of memory, while the young hands did the seeing for him. He watched me my first week, watched me stop over a parcel, and go still over one stone the way I go still. And one evening, he came and sat beside me and put that stone in his own ruined hand and said, "Tell me what you felt, girl." And I told him, before I could stop myself, that the stone was a swap, that it had not been in the parcel that morning, that you could feel it had been somewhere cold and wrong overnight. He was quiet a long moment, turning the cold thing in fingers that could no longer see it. "My mother had it," he said finally, "the feel for it." He did not laugh at me. He did the rarer thing. He believed me the first week before I had earned it, and he never once told the front of the house what I was, because he had spent 40 years learning exactly what the front of the house does with a gift like that. Remember Mr. Faber? He is holding a truth for me the whole time, at his end of the bench, and he does not tell me he kept it until the very last hour. I met Romilly Sorne on my 9th day, and I had been so careful to stay invisible. And it happened anyway. The lift to the salon was down, and I took the back stair with a finished piece in its box for the vault, and she was coming down it alone in the dark, the air working late the way the truly powerful do. And there is a turn in that back stair, where 2 people cannot pass without one of them stopping. I stopped. I looked up, and I forgot, for the first time in my life, to be invisible. Deep auburn hair the color of a garnet held to a candle, pushed back hard, a pale set face, cold green eyes that went over me and the box in my hands and did not soften. A thin platinum band on her right hand that I would come to know better than my own pulse. The frost of the house, the bench called her. She looked at me the way you look at a member of the staff you're waiting to let you pass. And then she did not pass. It was not a question. I said yes. She said, "The pave runs true." I said, "My grandmother." And she went down into the dark of the vault floor, and I stood on the stair with my heart going like a caught bird, and I told myself it meant nothing. It did not mean nothing. It never does. Now I have to take you into that season, because you cannot understand the cold woman on the dais until you have met the warm one underneath her, and there was a warm one. And I am one of perhaps 3 people alive who ever saw her. Maison Sorne was 31 that autumn, already cold, already the woman the bench was afraid of, the only child being forged into the next 100 years of the house. The other setters were terrified of her. I was not. And I have thought a great deal about why, and I think it is simply that I had been raised by a woman who read frightened people off the stones in their hands, and I could see from the first week that Maison Sorne was the most frightened person in that whole glass house, and that the cold was not the absence of feeling, but a wall built very carefully around far too much of it. She started coming to the bench after the floor emptied. It began as work. She was the only Sorne in 100 years who actually understood the back room, who could tell a good setting from a sold one, and she would stand at my pin in the late quiet and watch my hands and ask the questions. A person asks who is starving for one true thing in a house full of priced ones. That was all. And I would take it up and read it for her. This one has a feather under the table. This one was recut to hide a chip. This one is exactly what it claims, and there are not 3 of those in the vault. And she would watch me do the thing no one had ever paid me to do. And for the first time in my life, the gift was not a thing I had to hide. It was a thing she asked for. Remember those 2 words. They are the last thing I will ever say to you. It happened the way the true things do, slowly and then all at once and late at night over a tray of cold fire. She stopped, somewhere in that autumn, talking to me like an heir to a bench hand, and started talking to me like a frightened woman to the one person who had ever looked at her and not been afraid. She told me once, with her guard all the way down and a loose diamond turning in her fingers, that she had been raised to believe that being loved and being useful were the same thing. That she had been useful to this house her whole life and never once loved for 1 minute of it. I took the stone out of her hand so she would look at me instead of it, and I held her hand in the dark of that workshop with the cold city burning gold below us, and her hand said the truest thing a frightened person's hand can say, which is, please. I am going to keep the rest of that autumn for myself, and for the part of the story that is not for YouTube, except for the one thing you need. It was real. It was not the scandal her mother would later build out of it. We were 2 grown women, and for one season the coldest house in the trade had a warm room in the back of it that only we knew about. And in that room, Maison Sorne was not the frost of anything. I believed her. I want you to know that I believed her, because it matters for how much the next part cost. Her mother was the next part. Madame Maison Sorne was the president of Maison Sorne, the chair of its board, the widow who had really run the 100-year house from behind her dead husband's name for 30 years, and she was the most dangerous person I have ever stood in a room with. And I have stood in a room with a forger holding a knife. She found out about the back room the way women like her find out everything, through a paid pair of eyes. And she did not rage, and she did not threaten, because women like her do not need to. She simply began, very quietly, to solve me. I was a problem the way a flaw in a stone is a problem, something to be cut away before it could spread to the rest of the gem. The way she cut me away was a forgery, and it was a beautiful one, because she had spent a lifetime among beautiful forgeries, and she knew exactly how they are built. The house's founding stone is a legendary fancy golden diamond the size of a thumbnail, a deep warm gold like the last hour of light, and it is called the Sorne Sun, and it is the literal heart of the centenary, 100 years of the house arranged around that one stone. I had set it 3 weeks before the end. I was the only bench hand in a generation the master trusted with the sun, and I had it under my lamp and my hands for 2 nights. And Madame Regine knew that, because Madame Regine knew everything, and she built her forgery on the one true fact that my hands had last been on the sun. It happened the way it always happens to women like me, fast and quiet, and with the door already closed before I understood I was in the room. I was called up from the bench one evening, the only time in 3 years I was ever summoned to the salon floor. And there was Madame Regine, and there was the head of house security, and there was a velvet tray with the Sorne sun gone from its setting, and a clever cold paste sitting in the dish where the sun should have been. And Madame Regine looked at me with a grief on her face so perfect, I almost believed it myself, and said, "For the security man and the cameras and the record, Elodie, how could you?" I want to be honest about what those next 10 minutes did to me, because I think you have had 10 minutes that rearranged your spine. I read that paste off the tray in half a second. I did not even have to touch it. I could feel from 3 feet away that the thing in the dish was glass, and the sun was somewhere warm and close and hidden. And I understood in the same half second exactly what was being done to me, and I understood that there was not one person in that gold room who would believe the bench girl over the president. I said the stone was a swap. I said I could feel the real one was still in the house. Madame Regine said gently, terribly, "Of course you can, dear. You said it." And the trap closed, perfect and seamless, the way only the truly expensive ones do. She did not call the police. That is the part that took me years to understand. A house like Sorne does not want a trial. It wants the problem gone and the name clean. So she offered me the house's other instrument, the velvet one. In a private room with no cameras, she slid a check across the table, a number with enough knots on it to buy my silence and my disappearance, and my agreement to never once say the word Sorne again. And a sheet for me to sign that said I admitted the theft and accepted the house's mercy in not pressing it. And she said, in that same gentle voice, "Sign and go, and the heir never has to know what you really are." She knew which threat would land. She had read me as well as I have ever read a stone. What she did not know, what no one in that gold room knew, what I had found out myself only 9 days before, alone, in the staff washroom of that very house with my back against the cold tile, was that I was already carrying Romilly Sorne's child. I had not told her. I had been waiting for the right hour, the brave hour, and the brave hour had not come yet, and now it never would, because I was a thief in the house record, and a number on a check, and a woman being told to disappear. And I made the decision that has cost me and saved me in equal measure ever since, the decision I would make again and hate again every day. I tore the check in half on that polished table. I did not sign the sheet, and I did not say one word about the child. I want you to understand the pride of it, because it is the engine of everything after. I would not be bought. I would not let the first thing my child ever was be a thing that was paid for and hidden, a leverage, a settlement, a secret kept in a safe. If I could not have Romilly as the woman who chose me with her eyes open, knowing everything, I would not have her as a woman trapped by a stick I held over her. So I tore the check, and I walked out of Maison Sorne with my grandmother's loop in my apron, and her child under my heart and nothing else, and I let them write thief in the record, and I went into the dark to raise the one true thing that season had made, alone, the way the women in my family have always done the hardest things, quietly and on their own and too proud by half. But there was a letter. I have to tell you about the letter because it is the second blade, and I did not know it had been turned until the very end. In the first raw week after, before the pride hardened all the way, I wrote to her, one letter, in my own hand, the truest thing I have ever written. Not asking for anything, not the money, not even her. Only telling her the one fact she had a right to know. That there was going to be a child. That it was hers. That I had taken nothing and signed nothing. And that whatever they had told her was a forgery, the way the paste was a forgery. I sealed it, and I sent it to her private rooms, and I waited. And nothing came back. And I told myself that her silence was her answer, that she had read the truest thing I would ever write, and chosen the house. I built 4 months of a life on that silence. The silence was a lie, too. She never got the letter, but I am getting ahead of the stone. The 4 months alone were their own story, and I will not make you sit through all of them. I will give you the shape. I found a bench in a small, honest house on the other side of the city. A repairs and reset shop run by a kind half-deaf widower who asked no questions and paid in cash and did not care what record a great house had written about me. I set wedding bands and fixed broken clasps and read, for the first time in my life, only stones that belonged to ordinary people who loved each other. And there is a peace in that I did not expect. I grew slowly rounder and more careful. I felt the child turn for the first time at a bench under a hard lamp, with a stranger's anniversary ring in my hand, and I put the ring down, and I put my hand flat against myself, and I cried the way you cry when a thing is too large to hold. Quietly, so the half-deaf man would not have to notice. And I kept the test. I have to tell you that I kept it, because it is the whole hinge of the night I am taking you to. The little white test from that washroom, the one that had changed the shape of my whole life against the cold tile of a house that would write me down as a thief 9 days later. I had not been able to throw it away. On my last night at Sorne, in the hour between the torn cheque and the walk into the dark, I had gone back down to my sealed bench one final time to take my grandmother's spare loop and my own few tools, and I had not been able to make my hands drop that little white thing into the house's bin like rubbish. So I had taped it to the back of my bench drawer, behind the panel where the wax and the spare pins live, in the one private corner of the one house that had ever felt like mine. And I had left it there. And I had walked out, and I had not let myself think about it again. I did not know that a sealed bench keeps a secret exactly the way a stone does. Now I can take you to the Gala, because now you know what I was carrying into it. The centenary. 100 years of Maison Sorne, and the house had decided to mark it with the largest unveiling in its history. The centenary collection, 100 pieces built around the Sorne sun, shown for one night to 300 of the oldest names in the trade, and the press and the money, in the glass and gold hall of the flagship, under 100 years of the house's own chandeliers. And on the same night, in front of all of them, Romilly Sorne was to be named the next president of Maison Sorne, her mother stepping back at last, the cold air finally given the house she had been forged for. I read about it in the trade pages like everyone else. A woman on the wrong side of the city with her name written down as a thief. And I told myself it had nothing to do with me. I was wrong, the way I am only ever wrong about myself, because the centenary collection could not be finished. I learned this later, but I will give it to you here so the night makes sense. The final setting of the sun into the centerpiece, the one setting that mattered, the heart of the heart, had failed twice under 2 different master hands, the pave running false, the sun sitting wrong in its cup, and the unveiling was 11 days away, and the house was quietly losing its mind. And old Mr. Faber, half blind at the end of his own bench, had said the one thing that no one wanted to hear, and everyone knew was true. There was exactly one pair of hands in the trade that could seat that stone, and the house had written her down as a thief and thrown her into the dark 4 months ago. And then Mr. Faber, who had kept my truth at his end of the bench all this time, did a quiet and enormous thing. He wrote to me, not in the house's name, in his own. The letter came to the little repair shop in his shaking hand, and it did not mention the theft, and it did not mention Romilly, and it did not apologize, because Mr. Faber was a man who knew the difference between an apology and a use. It said only this, that the sun would not seat, that the centenary would fail without the one pair of hands that could seat it, that he had told no one whose hands those were, and that there was a private contract and a private door and an honest fee for one night's work. No name on any record, in and out before the house woke. And at the bottom, in the hand of a man going blind, "Come and set the sun, girl. Then decide whether tonight is the worst night of your life or the first night you stop letting them keep you in the dark. The choice has always been yours. I should not have gone. I want to be very clear that every careful instinct I owned told me not to go, that it was a house that had branded me a thief, that the woman who ran it had threatened to have me arrested in front of the only person I had ever loved, that I was 4 months along and too visible now to hide what I was carrying from a room with that many sharp eyes in it. I went anyway, and I have asked myself 100 times why, and the truest answer is the one my grandmother would have known on sight. I went because the sun would not seat for anyone else, and I was the only one who could. And I had spent my whole life being right and invisible, and some stubborn, unkillable part of me needed just once to do the thing only I could do inside the house that had thrown me away. I went to set the stone. I told myself it was only the stone. It is never only the stone. The private contract was for the afternoon before the gala, the house in its last frantic hours of preparation, the bench given over to me alone for 3 hours behind a locked door while the front of the house ran in circles. Mr. Faber met me at the staff entrance and did not say he was sorry and did not say he had missed me, only put his ruined hand against the side of my face for 1 second, the way you check a thing is real, and then took me down to the bench. And there it was, my old pin, my old lamp, my sealed drawer with the house's tape still across it, and on a velvet tray under the lamp, the Sorne sun, the heart of the centenary, the stone I had been thrown into the dark for supposedly stealing, waiting for the only hands the house trusted to seat it. The irony of it could have cut glass. I did not laugh. I sat down at my own bench like a woman coming home to a house that had tried to kill her, and I picked up the sun. And the moment I closed my hand around it, I knew. I want to be careful here because this is the hinge of everything. The stone in my hand was warm and true and exactly itself. The real Sorne sun, no question. The genuine 100-year heart. The thing I had set 4 months ago. There was no doubt in it at all, which meant the stone that had sat in that velvet dish on the night Madame Regine destroyed me, the cold paste I had read from 3 feet away, had never been a theft I committed. The sun had never left the house. Someone had taken the real one out of its setting and put a paste in the dish and called it stolen and put my name on it. And then, the centenary, needing its true heart, had quietly produced the real sun again, recovered, safe, here in my hand, as if it had only ever been mislaid. The forgery was not the stone. The forgery was the theft. And I was holding the proof of it in my own hand, warm as the truth always is. I set the sun. I want you to know that even then, even holding the proof of what had been done to me, I did the work. 3 hours under the hard lamp, the pave running true under my hands, the way it had refused to run for anyone else, the great gold stone settling into its cup like a thing coming to rest, because some discipline in me older than my anger would not let me leave the heart of that house unseated even by the people who had branded me. When it was done, it was the best work of my life, and Mr. Faber put his blind fingers over the setting and went very still and said, "There, no one else alive," and his voice was not steady. I should have taken my fee and gone into the dark and never come back. The contract was for the afternoon. I was supposed to be gone before the house woke, but I made the mistake that the proud and the right always make. I stayed to watch them unveil the thing I had said. I told myself I would watch from the staff gallery, from the dark at the edge, invisible the way I had been my whole life, one anonymous face above 300 jeweled ones, here and gone, no one the wiser. I found a place at the rail of the high gallery in my plain dark coat, with my grandmother's loupe in my pocket, and the child quiet under my heart, And below me, the centenary hall filled with 100 years of money under 100 years of light, and the press at the edges, and the board in their gilded chairs. And on the dais, the sun I had set burning gold in its case beside the lectern, where Maison Sorne would in 1 hour be made the president of it all. And then she came in, and 4 months fell away under me like a trap door, the way they always do, the way they did on the stair. She had not changed the way I had changed. The season had not marked her the way it had marked me. And why would it, when she had been told a clean, simple story, and I had been carrying a heavy, true one? Deep auburn hair pulled back hard, the garnet of it caught by the chandeliers, cold green eyes going over the room like a woman counting exits, the thin platinum band on her right hand, and her thumb pressed to it once, hard, the old tell, the only thing about her that ever told the truth. The frost of the house, an hour from owning it, and I stood at the high rail in the dark and looked down at the mother of the only thing I had left in the world, and I understood with a sick falling certainty that I had been a fool to come, because I could not look at her and stay invisible. I never could. It is the one stone I have never been able to read coldly. It is the only one. I would have made it. I want you to know that I would have made it out clean, watched the unveiling, and gone into the dark with my fee and my secret and my torn cheque pride intact. Except that Sybil Aumont looked up. Sybil Aumont was the house's golden gemologist, the polished alpha the trade pages called the future of Sorne, the director Madame Regine had chosen as the suitable bond for her daughter, the woman who had spent 3 years putting her name on the front of work my hands had done in the back. She had been at the center of my ruin too, in the small useful ways the ambitious always are. It was Sybil who had discovered the paste in the dish, Sybil who had wept the right amount, Sybil who had stepped into the credit and the favor I left behind. And Sybil Aumont, working the room below me with a glass of champagne, looked up at the dark gallery for no reason at all, and found my face at the rail, and knew it. What happened next happened fast, the way the worst things do. I saw her recognize me, and I saw her decide in the same instant what to do with it. Because a woman like Sybil does not see a problem. She sees an opportunity wearing a problem's coat. She set down her glass. She crossed to the dais. She bent to Madame Regine's ear, and I watched the president's perfect face turn up toward the gallery and find me. And I watched 4 months of her certainty that I was gone and buried Curdle into something colder and faster. And then Madame Regine did the thing that women like her do when they are frightened, which is the thing that looks most like strength. She did not have me quietly removed. She decided, in front of 300 witnesses, and the press and her own daughter, to finish me in public, so that no version of me could ever rise again. She stopped the unveiling. She stepped to the lectern an hour early, beside the burning sun, and she lifted one ringed hand for the room, and the hall went quiet for the president of Maison Sorne, and she said, in a voice pitched to carry to the press at the back, "Before we begin, the house must protect itself. There is a person in this room tonight who once stole the very heart of this collection. She is in the gallery above you." And 300 faces turned up to the dark gallery, and the loupe in my pocket was suddenly the only warm thing in the world, and I stood in the one circle of light that found me with the house's word for me ringing off 100 years of gold, thief, while somewhere below me, on the dais, the woman I had loved went very still and looked up and did not yet know my face. I want to tell you that I was brave in that first moment. I was not. The first thing I felt, with 300 of the richest faces in the trade turned up at me, and the word thief still in the air, was the old animal pull to make myself small, to go invisible, to be the woman with the loupe who minds her bench, the trained 4-decade reflex of every woman in my family. And I felt the child under my heart, and I felt my grandmother's loupe in my pocket, warm from 50 years of her apron, and I heard her voice, the way you hear the dead when the floor is going out from under you. People will spend your whole life telling you what you are. don't believe a word of it. And I had, that very afternoon, held the proof of the lie in my own hand. The sun was warm and true on the dais. The theft was the forgery. And I was the only person in that hall who could feel it. So I did not let security reach me. I put both hands on the gallery rail, and I leaned into the light they had pinned me with. And I used the one thing 40 years of benchrooms had taught me a woman like me is never supposed to have, which is a voice that carries. The sun on that dais is real, I said, and the hall heard me, because a quiet hall always hears the one voice that is not afraid. I said it myself this afternoon. Madame Regine's face did not move, but her ringed hand did, a small tightening on the lectern, and I read that the way I read everything. The hall did not understand yet, but it leaned in, the way a room does when it can feel a true thing coming, and I gave it to them the only way I knew, the way my grandmother taught me, plainly, off the stone. I am a setter, I said. I read stones. It is the one thing I have ever been able to do that no one could take. 4 months ago, this house brought me up from the bench and showed me a cold paste in a velvet dish and called it the Sorne sun and called me its thief. I told them then, with no one listening, that the stone in the dish was glass and the real sun had never left this building. No one believed the bench girl. But the sun is on that dais tonight, warm and whole, recovered, because it was never gone. And then I looked straight down the light at Madame Maison Sorne, and I said the thing that I could feel was true, the way I can feel a feather under a table, the thing I had finally understood that afternoon with the warm sun in my hand. The real sun never left your safe, Madame. You have had it the whole time. I did not know about the letter the way you know a fact. I knew it the way I know a stone, the wrongness of a silence I had built 4 months of grief on, the one piece of the forgery I had never been able to make sit true. I gambled the whole night on a thing I could only feel. It is the only kind of gambling my family has ever been any good at. The hall was utterly silent, and into that silence, Madame Regine made the single mistake that the powerful make exactly once, which is to answer a feeling as though it were an accusation she could disprove. "This is the raving of a thief," she said. Too fast, half a beat too fast, and her thumb went to her ring the same hard way her daughters did, the same blood telling the same truth. And I watched 300 faces hear the speed of it. And on the dais, between the two of us, Maison Sorne, who had not said one word, who had been looking at me since I first spoke with an expression I could not read from the gallery, the cold gone strange on her face, Maison Sorne turned slowly and looked at her mother. I want to slow down here because this is the minute the whole 4 months turned on, and I have lived in this minute more nights than I have left it. Madame Regine did not open the safe. She did the thing instead that told the room everything. She called for security again, sharper now, to remove me, to clear the gallery, to end the unveiling, her composure going at the edges like a setting under heat, and Romilly stepped down off the dais. She left the lectern where she was an hour from being made president, and she left the burning sun, and she walked toward the gallery stair with her thumb white on her platinum band, and she said to the head of house security, in a voice the whole hall heard, "No one touches her." And the security man, a houseman for 20 years, looked between the president who paid him and the heir who would, and he made the choice that ends houses. He gave the heir the keys. She was gone perhaps 10 minutes. They were the longest 10 minutes of my life, longer than the 10 in the salon with the cheque, longer than the washroom with the test. I stood at the gallery rail in the pinning light with 300 faces no longer sure which way to look, and Mr. Faber came and stood beside me at the rail without a word, his blind eyes turned out at the gold room, his ruined hand finding my arm and holding it, an old setter steadying a young one through the hardest seat of her life. And Madame Regine stood at her lectern beside the sun and did not sit and did not speak, a woman watching 100 years of careful forgery come up to the light, and for the first time since I had known her name, she looked exactly her age. And then Romilly came back into the hall, and she was carrying two things, and the room saw them before it understood them. In one hand she had a stone, a loose golden diamond, the twin of the one burning on the dais, a thumbnail of warm gold light, the second sun, the real one her mother had pulled from the setting 4 months ago and locked away, the proof that the theft had been a forgery, recovered now from the president's own safe in front of every witness in the trade. And in the other hand she had a letter, a sealed letter, the seal broken now, 4 months old, in a bench girl's plain hand. She stopped in the center of the gold hall, with the false thief in the gallery above her, and the true forger at the lectern beside her, and the whole trade between. And she looked down at the letter in her hand, and then up at me, and across 40 feet of black marble and 100 years of light. She said one word, my name, the way she used to say it in the warm room, like it was the only word in the language that did not cost her something. I said yes. She said, you wrote to me 4 months ago. You told me there was... And she stopped because she was a woman who had been handed a forged grief and had just felt the real one come up underneath it. And a person can only hold so much at the speed the truth comes. And she looked down at the 4-month-old letter in her own hand, the truest thing I have ever written. And she read, in front of everyone, the one fact her mother had taken out of her hands and locked in a safe. I have to tell you what was in the letter, because she read it, and the room read it on her face. And there is no kindness in keeping it from you now. It said that I had taken nothing and signed nothing. It said that whatever the house had told her was a forgery, the way the paste was a forgery, and that one day she would have the eyes to see it. And it said, in the last line, the line I had written with my hand shaking in the first raw week, that there was going to be a child in the spring, and that the child was hers, and that I was not telling her this to hold anything over her, but because she had a right to know the one true thing that season had made before her mother turned it into a weapon. She read it, and on the dais Madame Regine said, low and fast, she is lying. It is another forgery. The woman forges. And Maison Sorne lifted her head and looked at her mother and said the quietest sentence in the whole loud history of that house. She doesn't forge. She reads, you forged. And then she did the thing they will be telling in the trade for 100 years. And I could not speak, so I did the only thing I had left. I took her hand, the one with the platinum band, and I pressed it flat against the child she did not know she had, and I let the truest thing in the room tell her itself. She made a sound I will not describe because it was not for the room, and she went down, all the way down, the frost of the house on one knee on the gallery floor with her hand spread over the child of the woman her mother had branded a thief, and she pressed her forehead to me, and for a moment there was no hall, and no press, and no 100 years of anything, only a frightened woman who had just been given back the one true thing that had been stolen from her hands. And then she stood, because she was still Maison Sorne, and she turned to the rail and looked down at the whole bright trade staring up, and she said the sentence that cracked the house down to its foundation stone, the one I told you at the start, the one I will hear in my good ear until I die. That is my child she is carrying, my child. The hall came apart the way a soldered thing comes apart under too much heat, all at once and along every seam. Madame Regine called it forgery and raving and a setter's trick to the very end. But the safe was open, and the second son was in her daughter's hand, and the letter was read. And the speed of her own denials had told 300 trained eyes everything they needed. The room had already turned, the way a room turns, all together like birds. And in the middle of it, Sybil Almont, tried the thing the ambitious always try, which is to be suddenly on the right side. She came toward the stair with her face arranged into shock. "Romilly, I had no idea. Your mother told me." And Romilly Sorne looked at her once, the cold back in place for exactly one person, and said, "You discovered the pace, Sibyl. You wept the right amount." And that was the whole of Sibyl Almont's future, ended in 9 words at the foot of a gallery stair, which is more than she ever gave me. But I have not told you the part the title promised you, the part that is the real hinge, and I have saved it because Romilly did not know it herself until the very end of that night. And I want you to learn it the way she did. When the hall had been cleared and the press put out and the board scattered to its lawyers, when it was only the 2 of us and old Mr. Faber in the gold ruin of the centenary, Romilly took me down to the bench. Not to talk. She could barely talk. She took me down to my old sealed bench because she needed, the way I had needed that afternoon, to stand in the one place in the house that had been mine. And she put her hand on the drawer with the house's tape still across it, the sealed drawer no one had opened in 4 months. And she said, "They sealed your bench the night they sent you away. I had it sealed." I thought, and she stopped because she had thought I was a thief, and she could not make her own thumb on her platinum band say it. And she broke the tape, because it was her house now, in every way that the morning's paperwork had not yet caught up to. And she opened my old drawer to give it back to me, the few honest tools of my honest trade. And behind the panel where the wax and the spare pins live, taped to the back of the drawer where I had hidden it in the hour between the torn cheque and the dark, she found the little white test, 4 months old, dated in my hand. The thing I had not been able to drop into the house's bin like rubbish on the worst night of my life. And tucked behind it, the other half. I had not even remembered doing it. The torn half of the cheque, the one with the knots, the one I had ripped in 2 on a polished table, rather than let the first thing my child ever was be a thing that was bought. She stood there at my old bench with the test in one hand and the torn cheque in the other. The 2 halves of the worst night of my life that I had hidden in the dark of a drawer 4 months ago. And I watched her read the whole thing off them the way I read a stone, the date, the test, the cheque torn and refused, the woman who had been pregnant and branded and bought and had torn the buying in half and walked into the dark, rather than hold a child over the woman she loved. I watched her understand that I had known, that night, that I was carrying her child, and had told them nothing, and had taken nothing, and had gone. And she turned to me with the little white test in her steady surgeon's hand, and her face entirely undone, and she said, "You hid this here." Madame Regine made her last move 3 days later, through lawyers, in a quiet room, the way she had made the first one, a second cheque, larger than the first, an offer to settle and seal and make it all quietly go away before the spring and the child and the trial that was forming around the forged theft could finish ending her. She had me brought in alone, the way she had 4 months before, certain the same trap would close on the same frightened woman. But I was not the same woman, and I had not come alone in the way she meant. And I looked at the number that was meant to be my whole future, and the price of my silence, and I did the one thing in my whole life I have never once regretted. I did not tear it this time. I want you to notice the difference, because it is the difference 4 months and one true claim makes in a woman. 4 months ago, I tore the first cheque out of pride, the fierce, proud refusal of a girl who would rather have nothing than be bought. This time I slid it back across the table, whole, unsigned, and I said, in my grandmother's flat, plain voice, the voice for the front of a house that had finally learned I was always going to be standing in it, "Keep it, madame. I read stones. I read the one in the dish 4 months ago, and the one in your safe, and the speed of your hands when I named the letter. I have read your whole forgery off the things you left behind, the way I will read every quiet thing this house does for the rest of my life, because I am going to be in it now, at the front of it, with my name on the door your daughter promised me." And I left the cheque on the table, whole, and I walked out. And that was the last time Maison Sorne ever sat at the head of anything. I want to give you the spring, because you have earned it, and because the women in my family have spent too many generations ending their stories in the dark, and I am done with that. The trial took the house's word thief off my record and put it where it belonged, and Romilly was made president of a smaller, cleaner, truer Maison Sorne than the one her mother had run. And the first thing she did with it, the very first, before the lawyers were even finished, was exactly the thing she had promised me on the last good night of that first autumn. She put my name on the front of the house, not as a wife brought in from the cold, as the master of the bench, the eye of the house, the setter whose hands seat the sun, because that is what I am, and she had always, even when she thought I was a thief, refused to pretend otherwise. The child came in the spring, in the warm ordinary terror of an ordinary hospital, with Romilly Sorne, the frost of the house, the woman the whole trade had been raised to fear, white-knuckled and useless and entirely undone in a plastic chair, holding my grandmother's brass loop in her fist the whole time because I had asked her to, and she would have held a live coal if I had asked her to. A daughter, dark gold hair like the last hour of light, and cold green eyes that were not mine at all, garnet and green, Romilly's eyes looking up out of my arms, the way the truest stones always show you exactly where they came from. We did not give her a grand name. We gave her my grandmother's, because everything I am that is worth anything came folded into a child's fingers around a warm brass loop, and because the women in my family have always been the ones in the back room who could see, and it was time one of us was named out loud at the front. So that is the whole of it. The thing the trade still tells wrong in the pages, and I am telling you right, how a bench girl with her name written down as a thief read the one forgery 100-year house thought no one could see, off a stone and a silence and the speed of a guilty hand, and got back the woman and the truth and the front of the house, with the child they had sworn would never have a name asleep between us. My grandmother was right about all of it, the way she was right about everything she ever read off a cold stone. People will lie to your face your whole life. They will call you the bench girl, the hands in the back room, the thief best removed before she spoils the gala. But the stone in their hand was there for all of it, and the stone cannot lie. And your only job, the whole of it, is to be quiet enough to feel it and brave enough to say it out loud before they can seal it in a safe and call it the truth. We were at the bench last week, the three of us, the house quiet after hours the way I have always loved it. The baby asleep in a drawer lined with velvet at the end of the pin the way I once slept at my own grandmother's. Romilly put a stone down in front of me under the hard lamp. A new one, a client's, something with a story she could not read and I could. And she looked at me across the bench with our daughter sleeping between us and the platinum band on her hand, and the whole impossible front of the house finally true. And she said the two words she has been saying to me since the 9th day. The two words that are the realest thing she owns. The two words I told you to remember. And I took up the stone, and I held it to the dark window the way my grandmother taught me, and I showed her.